Hello and welcome to the Juneteenth 196 to 2020 special edition. B-Brilliant Minds Project Inc. is honored to bring to you invited guests who will share their personal life stories, past to present. B-Brilliant Minds Project Inc. understands the importance of leaving a legacy that will carry on after we're gone. We know that we are responsible for keeping our stories alive, creating opportunities for the voices of our communities to be heard and seen. The Juneteenth 196 2020 special edition will capture the essence of why we are celebrating and honoring the back and shoulders of our ancestors who we are standing on. Their faith, their resilience, their strength, blood, sweat, and tears are the building blocks for the generation to come. Blowing into the winds on creation as we create and prepare the brilliant minds of the future towards excellence. So, good evening and hello, Miss Ayanna. Tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, Barbara. It's so great to stay in community with you. We've come a long way since you were in my class at Laney College.
Yes, yes.
My name is Ayanna Anderson, and I met Barbara through our engagement at Laney College, where I've been an adjunct ethnic studies professor for the past 9 years. And in addition to that relationship, we've also come together through my day job. And my day job is I lead community engagement efforts for the nonprofit Donor Network West. And we're the agency that connects the thousands of people in need of life-saving transplants, organ and tissue transplants, with the donor community. And what I do is I go into the community, primarily multicultural communities, with the message of donation is vital. We are overrepresented on the transplant waiting list, Black and brown people. And we have an opportunity to change the narrative by being registered organ and tissue donors. And we've been able to link up with Barbara and her phenomenal colleagues for Juneteenth. So I love the work that I do because in all aspects, you know, I'm working to empower people of color and to bring some empowerment to where, you know, the communities that I serve. So I love it.
Awesome. And how many kids do you have in your family, your hubby? And thank you for allowing us to be, allow you to be with us this evening.
Yeah, they're being great about that. I'm married to an Oakland native. We've been married for almost 17 years. And we have 2 sons. Our oldest is Amari. He's 14 years old. He's a sophomore. And our youngest is Jelani, and he's a 6th grader. So we have a high school student and a middle school student, and homeschooling is real right now. The struggle's real, but we're very blessed. We have wonderful, wonderful boys.
How about your parents? You have any family in the Bay?
You know, I have extended family as far as, you know, play aunties and friends of friends that have become like a family, but I'm actually from the south side of Chicago.
Oh, hey!
And that is a huge part of my identity, which my children get sick of. And this summer, everybody was watching Michael Jordan, and I kept saying, that's me, Chicago Bulls. I was there for the era of The Last Dance. So, and I'm one of 4 girls. I have 3 sisters. We are all spread out throughout the United States. And I'm blessed to still have my mom with me. We just celebrated a big birthday for her last year, and we were on a cruise in Cuba. And we always keep saying, thank goodness we took the opportunity to come together and to check out Cuba and to really honor our mom. I think COVID is really letting us know that you got to seize the moment. You got to make those memories. Time is not promised. So make those memories when you can. So, and my father is an ancestor now. He's been gone for 20 years. And both my parents were just very instrumental in the path that I have today. My mom's an educator. My father was an attorney. They were both very steeped in community activism in Chicago. So they created those sturdy roots on which
Yeah.
we stand and on which I stand. So I'm very grateful, very grateful.
So as a child, your dreams, what tell us, share with us about the dreams that you had as a young child.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the 70s. And
Okay.
so I grew up in the Black is Beautiful era, Black Power and feminism also, just feeling like girls could do whatever they wanted to do. So there really wasn't anything that I didn't think that I could do. That being said, what was really popular on TV at the time was Cher, Carol Burnett,
Yes.
all Donnie and Marie,
Yes.
all the variety shows.
I'm not alone.
So I as a very young girl, I was like, oh, I'm destined for Hollywood. I'm the next Donna Summer. I'm taking the throne from Donna Summer. And I do have a voice, but I did not make it to Hollywood. But I would say the other passion that kind of bubbled up for me pretty early was writing.
Okay.
I just always had a very vivid imagination. I was a voracious reader. And I read books that were probably too grown for me. And I just always loved to write. And, more so like short stories or just being very creative with like different school projects. And when I was in high school, I was on the newspaper team. So I didn't know if I was going to be a journalist or like what that was going to turn into. But I ultimately I had such a strong love of literature that I just ended up majoring in English. And I thought I was going to become an English professor, but I actually did a pivot. And I went into African American studies with an emphasis on literature. And then a couple of years after grad school, I went back to grad school for another master's degree in public relations. So those two worlds very much live together. And I am a diehard grammarian. I'm a diehard, I'm by the books when it comes to grammar rules. So my children they don't love that about me, but I love the ability to write. I feel like if you're a strong writer, there's nothing, that you can't do.
So, to say something to the mothers and the fathers that's working with their children at home, what would you say to them? How would you get the kids interested in reading and the grammar and working hard in that area of their lives? Because as you just said, we know how important reading is.
Yeah, I always talk to my kids about the fact that, Black people were denied the ability to read and write. And that people like Frederick Douglass bartered with food and did all kinds of things to be able to learn how to read and write. And that was really a form of resistance for our people, was to be able to read and write. And fortunately for us, our ancestors wrote slave narratives. And if I'm always looking back at like how eloquent our ancestors were and how well they wrote and how much they articulated what they were going through. And I have even had the pleasure of reading some writings from my great grandmother, because she went to Hampton University and I went to Hampton University, and some of her writings are in the school archives. And just to read how beautifully she wrote, or sometimes, my mom will share letters. I just feel like we have to have standards. And so that's the point I always impress upon my children is, we have to have standards, and we have to master the language that we know. And truly, global citizens, if you look around the world, many people speak multiple languages. And so for our children, I think it's hard. I don't think we don't have the benefit of having those multiple languages as some other cultures do. So I'm like, if English is the only one you're speaking, you better know how to read and write well, because that's the way that you're gonna, communicate. And I would say for parents, I always read with my children, even if my children are old. And my son just had an assignment, and I asked him to sit and read with me, and he didn't want to do that because he's a sophomore, and he's like, I don't want to read out loud to you. But I read out loud to my husband, to my children. I ask them to do the same with me, because I enjoy that. I enjoy that time. I read poetry with them. I read short stories with them. I tell stories with them. And I just think, you know, we come from an oral tradition. That is the foundation for Africans. You know, we pass our stories down orally. So I think connecting the two, there's always a place where you can find that time with your family.
That's right. And you know, you just touched on your passion a little bit there. So can you share a little bit more about your passion? What other kind of things that you love to do? And do you have any writings that you can read for us?
I don't have any writings right in front of me, but I will tell you that I wrote a couple of opinion op-ed pieces around Black Lives Matter right after the whole scenario.
Oh my God.
And Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I did it on behalf of the organizations that I represent, but
and
you know,
those are,
I'm sorry.
And those are?
Well, they're just, you know, they're statements, you know, all the companies were kind of coming out with these statements about being anti-racist and supporting Black Lives Matter. And so I was able to just kind of put that intention in the context of what, in my industry, what we're experiencing, which is, you know, like many other industries, we have a lot of African Americans, Black and brown people who love this work, but unfortunately we've not been given the chance to have a seat at the table, and leadership can be elusive. And so I just kind of connected the dots about, you know, how we advocate for those on the transplant list. That's what we're always thinking about, because their systems are compromised. And I sort of made the parallel that as professionals and practitioners of color, we're compromised because we're doing this great work, but yet we're not being given those opportunities to ascend into leadership. So I find that, like, when there are things going on externally, it does light a fire for me to be able to write and to just kind of give voice to what's going on. And that's what I think is so great about social media. I think everybody is tapping into their inner writer, if you think about it. I mean, a post becomes your own short story, your own poem, your own novel. People probably don't look at it that way. And I'm not a huge social media person at all, but you know, the times that I do sort of, you know, write on LinkedIn, or when I used to have Facebook back in the day, that's a perfect way for you to exercise that, and get that out there. I am passionate about so many things. I'm definitely passionate about education. I'm definitely passionate about working with lifelong learners. And I continue to always love being in the presence of my Laney College students, for sure, because I meet so many people at all these different places in their life. Some people are high school students. I've had students that are 70 years old and want to go back to college. I always have great admiration for people who prioritize, knowing that there's so many of our students just juggle so much to be able to get to school. I mean, very few people are just like, oh, I'm just sitting around at home and I'm just going to make my way to class. Like, most people are working moms. They bring their kids to my class. And I, you know, don't mind that at all. I embrace that. I'm also very passionate about travel. I think most of us are. And I think COVID is making us really sad for the days, you know, where we could travel very easily. But I am a globe trotter. I do love adventures. I will tell you that during COVID, we did take a family road trip. And my husband is very loath to get on the road. I mean, he's a, you know, where's my passport? Where's my plane ticket type of guy. But because of COVID, you know, I was able to sort of convince him, okay, let's just get a change of scenery. And we ended up taking a really nice road trip and checking out the Pacific Northwest. And it was great because, you know, we had all this time in the car with our children, and, you know, we just had the chance to make these memories in other places that we probably otherwise would not venture to. Like, we wouldn't normally venture to Oregon or coastal Washington. Like, those are not places that are hot on our radar. But resilience is the name of the game, right? So there you have it. Like, normally we like to hop on planes, but thanks to COVID, we're hopping in the car and it's all good. I'm passionate about, of course, issues impacting Black and brown people from a health standpoint, from a political standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. I'm a huge comedy fan. I'm a huge film and television fan too. And I've been actually able to teach some classes in those areas, which I like. And I am trying to figure out about how I can have another revenue stream or another link to my creative side. And I really want to see what it takes to get into a writer's room. You know, I really want to see what that looks like and to see if I might be able to just intern and figure that out. I'm also a big fan of podcasts. I am actually an intern right now for a company. I'm trying to learn how to do podcast productions. I took a class at UC Berkeley, which was great, but I just didn't master the mechanics. So I'm now like an intern for this tech company, and they're allowing me to learn how to do that. So I just think I'm passionate about just living life to the fullest, right? Just going through life with exuberance and with faith, and just being grateful for the opportunities that come your way.
And that leads me into inside of our actual class. What part of because you go from Africa to 1865. So in that pathway, what part did you really love teaching? I know you love teaching all of it, but can you?
I know. I love so much of it.
Yes. Go ahead.
Whenever I'm teaching that course, I think what I love the most is I love to talk about, I love to really unpack what the Middle Passage was like for enslaved Africans, and specifically just the horrors that we endured, and that passage and that voyage. And just like, you know, trying to really reveal for people the atrocities of it so they understand what it means for your ancestors to have really survived and endured. That's a huge part of the journey that I like to spend a lot of time on. Another aspect of that time frame that I like a lot is actually resistance. And I think so much of the dialogue is around, I mean, we know like folks like Harriet Tubman. I mean, we sort of know about, you know, slaves, enslaved Africans who ran away, and who, you know, many times, you know, tried it multiple times. Some people were successful, some people weren't. But I often like to talk about the day-to-day acts of resilience that enslaved Africans, you know, wielded. So whether it was, you know, feigning sickness and just being too sick to work, or whether it was, you know, compromising the dinner service or burning a meal, or all those sort of day-to-day things that people did to kind of have a modicum of dignity and to just hold on to the fact that in this environment where all control has been taken away, they find a way to subvert their experience. So I very much so love that. And I also do love to talk about how intelligent and creative and smart enslaved Africans were when it came to finding their freedom. You know, some people, I mean, we have these great stories about people who mailed themselves in a box to freedom, you know, people who, you know, put makeup on. And there's a story of a couple that escaped to freedom, and the wife or the female partner was extremely light and the male partner was brown. And they got away with it by her acting like she was a freed white woman and he was her enslaved captive, and they made it to freedom. So I just love that. For me, like, I just think as a people, we're so resilient, we're so innovative. We are always like, whatever comes our way, we find a way to rise to the top. And that really fuels me. You know, I just feel like in everything that comes around, and you can even see this today when, you know, you see all the memes, all the commentary that people share about microaggressions and the Karens that they encounter and the Beckys that they encounter. Like, I just love our languaging. I love how we just step into creativity, even when we're being oppressed and even when we're being, you know, treated as less than, we still find a way to remix things and to just have our creativity. So I just love that spirit about us.
And, you know, well, as to lead into the spirit, because you talked, you shared in our lessons about the resilience and the spirit of our ancestors. So through that tragedy, that trauma that happened to us, we still hold on to our faith. Can you share a little bit about that, how they did then?
Absolutely. Well, I think, it's interesting when you think about when you're being dehumanized. I think your oppressors think that, if you deprive people of a language, if you deprive people of food, if you deprive them of, the ability to move and navigate as they normally would, that they will just sort of adhere to your religion and your philosophies. And what our ancestors did very smartly is they always retained their original spiritual context, and they just sort of integrated. And so the way that we've been able to practice our spirituality as African Americans is very much like a gumbo of, what our ancestors retained, because throughout the diaspora, so many of us came together. There's just a mixture there. And that's a big part of my class too, is to let people know, like, we were Muslims in Africa. We were a multitude of faiths in Africa. And so to that extent, people think that the narrative is just like, enslaved Africans automatically became Christians, but there were many people who were Muslims, and there are many people who practice all kinds of other faiths. So I think for us, again, if you look at our experience, we are not a monolith. African Americans are very nuanced, and we have a variety of ways. But I think that as a whole, the unifying thread is that we are people of faith. And I mean, whatever that looks like, if you're Jehovah's Witness, Seventh-day Adventist, if you're Catholic or whatever, Muslim, that we are people of faith, and that I think, we are sort of shored up in our souls with faith, and that allows us to really navigate the world, because we definitely believe that we are a chosen people.
Mm-hmm. And with that, it's the rhythm, our soul is, when we talk about our spirit, our wisdom and our soul is what exudes. When we're having the Juneteenth event, I have people say to me, Miss Howard, I don't know what's going on, but I feel something at this place is totally different. And I chuckle and go to the side and like, yes, you feel the spirit of the Lord and our ancestors, because we are here on that day. It's about us loving on each other, being free, and having the opportunity to learn about each other. That's why it was so important for us to make sure, along with our Juneteenth, we had an educational piece, and that was going to learn about our history. You're going to about us.
Thanks to George Floyd and everything that kind of bubbled up this year. I mean, people who had never, my company talked about Juneteenth. I led a discussion because, of course, I teach it. But, seeing all these companies, seeing the Gap, Old Navy, all these other big brands now like corralling around Juneteenth and getting educated about Juneteenth. And I think, the message there is just that, like, even when we're supposed to be free, we have to fight for our freedom. And that is very much a metaphor for where we are now. I think, part of that is around really calling a thing a thing. And companies recognizing, like, this anti-racist climate, this criminalization of our people, again, it really, it erodes this myth that, for African Americans, we have overcome. And certainly we have made progress. But as long as you have systemic racism, and as long as you have these variables and these factors, and you look at, like, the 1619 point is just so critical, because we know that we've never been given reparations. And I actually just saw a show that estimated that if descendants of African slaves were to ever be given reparations, an economist estimated that it would be about $19 trillion to actually give descendants the amount owed if you start calculating hourly labor from 1619 forward. So if you think that, we're people that should be inheriting $19 trillion, and we know that that's probably not going to happen. We know that we didn't get our 40 acres and a mule, the vast majority of us. We know that when we had Black Wall Street, they burned it to the ground. So again, it's just like we take these steps forward, and then we have these steps that we end up taking back. So I love that you've always been such a huge advocate for Juneteenth. I love that people now more than ever are really, we're seeing Juneteenth t-shirts like never before. I was admiring yours. I think this is, cause for celebration that more and more people are having this conversation, which essentially is just about freedom. It's it's tied to this certain, scenario in Texas, but the bigger conversation is just about, is freedom free? Are you really free?
Yes. So, and the only way you can be free is in your mind. So,
for sure. Right. And
so go ahead.
I was just going to say, and so to that end, I think, people having the chance to, go back, learn about Juneteenth. And, I'm not going to say all of us all knew about Juneteenth, because I think it's quite regional, the celebrations in what areas of the country. Juneteenth is a big deal. But I think because of this year, there's a national conversation happening around this, situation, and how it connects to freedom being fleeting, and how we always have to advocate for freedom. We're always having to be vigilant, right? Is really critical. And especially at this particular juncture where we are in this election with so much on the line, it's just a very powerful reminder to people that your vote is a form of freedom. You must exercise your right to vote. And even for me, and what I love so much is that if you're dialed in and attuned into this experience, if you're open and seeking that knowledge. I mean, even in this year, I didn't know, and I just learned this when John Lewis passed, that when the Voting Rights Act passed, and our ancestors were trying to, cast their votes, that they would have all of these, of course, mechanisms in place to try and thwart, their ability to vote. And I did not know that, at some polling stations that we had situations of like having to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar. I had no idea that that was one of the tactics. I knew that they, based on the movie Selma, I knew that they would ask you like these very intricate, detailed, like lists of facts that you had to recite in order to be able to cast your vote. And that was not that long ago. And so now that we take a look at what's happening now currently in this climate where we see a lot of nefarious things happening with the post office and mailboxes disappearing. The point of it is we must continue to be vigilant, right? You cannot take your eyes off of, what's going on. So
that's right. And so, I'm glad you touched on the Voting Rights Act, because I was going to ask you about that. The other thing I wanted to know is, in the time, in the era of the Black resistance, you talked about that earlier, but the braiding of our hair and how they were road maps. Didn't you share in our class a little bit about that? Or the gates on the gates there are symbols.
I think I may have talked about how when folks were trying to find pathways to freedom, how, again, we always had covert symbols and signs. And I do spend some time in my classes talking about how things like there were quilts that were made and quilts that were hung up on houses that were also surreptitiously designed so that slaves could get a signal about their pathways and how to navigate those journeys. And I mean, we think about how spoiled we are and how, like, I'm always like, do I have Siri? Do I have Alexa? Do I have somebody that can tell me where I'm going? I mean, if I have to rely on a map, I'm like, it's all bad for me. I don't know where I'm going. If I go to a park and I just have to rely on the maps, I'm like, I'm about to be lost in this park. So if you just, again, think about just how tenacious and our fortitude and our creativity and just hidden in plain sight, right? For people to, abolitionists, freed slaves, or slaves that were now free, and advocates, the ways that they were able to leave those breadcrumbs for us to have a pathway and to make our way to freedom is essential. And I think that generosity and that spirit of, we all need to be looking out for one another is something that continues, and I think that it saddens me sometimes when I think that people get disconnected from their culture if they feel like, oh, I've made it, so I'm good. Like, this is not, your struggle's not my struggle. Like, I just always feel like we have to be cognizant that we're all in a collective struggle. And I think that these political dynamics of today really, they reveal that. I mean, think about all the nasty ways that, some of the candidates are being referred to. And we're thinking about the different Black women who potentially could nab the VP role, all of the different commentary and how we were scrutinized. it's so important that we continue to always, I think, advocate for those who are coming behind us, right? Because it's not easy.
And, you know, also I wanted to lead in, I know as a professor, and I know the role that you're in, that you've experienced micro and macro aggression. Can you share a little about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely had this sort of, I think, the typical African-American woman's experience of, you know, if I raise my concerns about something in the workplace, I've definitely been given, you know, feedback that, like, you know, you were so aggressive, you made me feel uncomfortable when you brought that up because your tone and, you know, the way you express yourself made me feel very nervous. And I'm like, I don't know, like, I am a super sunshiny spirit, and, you know,
You are.
and like, I don't know why my raising a flag about something makes you personalize it. You know, whenever I've had protective styles and I've had like different box braids or I've had like twists, you know, a lot of people give me commentary. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, why are you wearing your hair like that? Oh, do you even need to really wear braids? Why are you wearing braids? You know, oh, well, I don't like your twists. I like your box braids better. And, you know, and I don't wear protective styles that often because it's so expensive, first of all. I mean, it's always like $200, 8 bags of hair. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of money. But it always shocks me that like my hair becomes like a community conversation, and that people feel compelled to like rate my hair, comment on my hair, have just like deep conversations about my hair, which I don't normally, you know, necessarily get. But it's very instructive for me when I have protective styles to just see the difference in the way that I'm treated and the way that people feel emboldened to just give you their unsolicited commentary about your physical appearance, which I just don't think we necessarily do as much. So, you know, and I've just had like a whole series of situations where, you know, I had one just this week where I was entitled, you know, to receive this recognition, and I had like left countless messages, you know, my manager left messages, and I ultimately had to escalate it to the very top position, to the president of the organization. I had to let him know in my subject matter line, Black Excellence Matters. That was literally my subject line in that email. And then I just had to pull receipts, like this happened on this date. Like, I'm escalating it to the top because no one else has been willing to help me, and I have nowhere else to go. Can you help me? And I couched it that way very deliberately. I very much so referenced myself as a Black woman, and that this was something entitled to, you know, that I was entitled to by virtue of working on a multicultural campaign. And the optics in 2020 are not good. It's not good that like I'm not being given my recognition and that people in your organization are not resolving that for me. So I got a personal phone call from him. But I mean, it took me like sending him a message privately, sending him an email, like all of these different things for me to finally get some satisfaction. And, you know, I'm just like, I mean, this is what we sort of have to do. You know, I definitely have to advocate for my children all the time. You know, I have 2 Black boys. You know, they've been in different situations in schools, you know, and when my children were in Oakland public schools, I found that I had a lot of run-ins with the room moms who were very, you know, dismissive and who were on team too much all the time and trying to, you know, mansplain to you, female-splain to you as if you're not intelligent, as if you don't get the dynamics. And I had quite a few run-ins with the moms, you know, because I'm just like, this is not my first rodeo, and I don't need you like in my mix. You know, I've got this. And this was at a grammar school, by the way, that was touted as being like the most diverse in Oakland. And I'm like, well, just because there's diversity does not mean that people know how to embrace and work in harmony with Black and brown people. You know, so I think that can be a little bit of a misnomer is, you know, diversity alone does not necessarily mean that there's inclusion and comfort in these interactions. And so it's been really interesting for me because, you know, I am from the South Side, from Chicago. I grew up in a very sort of insulated bubble of Blackness. And so there are times when I just feel like even in the Bay, you know, there can be a certain isolation, you know?
Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's to piggyback on what you said, we have a lot of folks that they're not cultural competence. They don't have a clue on how we get down and how we move. And it's like it's always pushed to the side. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. You guys are okay. It's like and you know, I wish that every person that is of another color could do that program or whatever it's called, and they can just be themselves, be Black for one day or 2 days, and let them, because for them to really be able to get it, I'm going to suggest that how can you just change your color for 1 or 2 days and see what we have to deal with daily. And that's another part about what our babies, our boys,
for sure.
Know, we have mine is, he's 30 years old, but I'm still concerned. I still worry. And he's like, Mom, but I'm like, just let me be a mother. You know, I get it. These people, you know, out here don't really care. They're heartless.
Yeah.
No one
they lack empathy and they lack sympathy, and they do not look at us as being human. You know, they look at us as being subhuman, and that very much so is a vestige of, you know, being chattel slaves. And you know, that is just a continuum of white supremacy, and we're always otherized and we're always marginalized and we're never sort of given that value. But I am very grateful that the conversations now are bubbling up and people are being way more transparent about, you know, their lived experiences. And that has been the blessing of technology. Technology is the ultimate, you know, we had bus boycotts and protests and marches, and we've had those things historically, but what has been the game changer in this latest resistance movement is technology, because technology is transparent. And as my husband pointed out, you know, because I think when the whole George Floyd thing happened and there was such a response and a global response, and, you know, it was like a confluence of all these things, right? Like people have been at home with COVID, people are stressed out about, you know, the pandemic, people have been laid off, you know, and then this happens. And I mean, it was a lynching essentially, but my husband's point to me was like, there's so many people who just saw it and just saw it with like clear vision because they weren't distracted by running their kids to the soccer games and like moving and grooving. And so since we're navigating the world so differently during the pandemic, it just really struck a chord. And I just feel like in life for African Americans, like that is the greatest salvation that we have right now, is to be able to record what's happening to you, because otherwise, without that evidence, without those receipts, there's always like, you know, oh, did that really happen? Are you sure? How are you interpreting that? Are you sure you're not reading too much into that? And that's why I love that technology has given us that, you know, completely neutral platform to just showcase, this is my lived experience. And I mean, every week I when we don't have some new footage, I'm shocked, but I think most weeks, not too many weeks go by where we don't have another fresh video showcasing how we're dehumanized. And of course, the brother in Milwaukee and that situation, Mr. Blake, and the fact that he was a peacemaker, you know, he was in a situation where he was trying to break up a fight and he was there with his children, and that he was gunned down like that in front of his children on his one child's 8th birthday.
Oh,
so the trauma. And that's the other thing is there needs to be more conversation about our trauma. Yes. You know, and what you know, what the toll is for us in the face of always being criminalized and second guessed, and, as Black women, not being given sympathy. I mean, whether it's like the doctors don't believe you're as sick as you are. I mean, it goes on and on. So I think the work for us is definitely mental health and self-care. I really think that's the next revolution for us, is to really find a place for our healing.
Well, that leads right into my next question. I had another one before then, but however, let me go here first. So us being as in the, is that the institution, I mean, not institution, in the, as 3/5 of a human being. That is what we are registered as. And a lot of folks, until we get those laws changed, to me, they're still gonna think we're 3/5 of a human being. That's why they are treating us like they're treating us, and it's as though we deserve it. And I believe, like you just said, the gun violence is a modern day lynching. That's what I call it. They're not lynching gross, but it's lynching because they're using an actual gun. So with the Constitution, so I know you shared a little bit about that in our history class too. So and Jim Crow. So all of the effects of the Jim Crow letter, we're still experiencing it today. And
absolutely. I mean, I've been listening to a podcast this whole summer about how schools are more segregated today than they ever were. Before Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, New York City has the most segregated school system in the country, New York City. So it's almost like there are two experiences, or there are multiple experiences depending upon if you are a person of color or if you are not. I agree. I think, that is, again, what the George Floyd scenario brought to mind was, this is a man who literally died with a knee on his neck. And so the knee on his neck is like the new noose on his neck, right?
There we go. Yes. Yeah. That's it. So for self-care, what do you do for self-care for yourself? What do you do personally?
Well, I wake up every day and I read my daily word, which gives me just a spiritual framing. And I love it because I try and get that, done as soon as I wake up, and I'm full of anticipation. And it really does help me kind of calibrate the way I navigate the world, because I'll be very focused on the message of the day and what I'm supposed to be, keeping in mind. So it might be let go, let God. It might be, gratitude, just kind of gives you a principle. It's almost like Kwanzaa when you have those 7 days of principles. It kind of gives you a principle for the day. So I do love that. With my children's busy schedules, I have not really been to a formal church environment, but I just think I'm so lucky because I'm around so many faith warriors and so many Black women who are deep into their faiths. And almost on a daily basis, we're invoking God, we're invoking what a blessing. We're just talking about, we're unpacking our experiences and trying to find out the lessons that we're supposed to be paying attention to. Yeah. So I almost feel like I'm in a really rich community of women who are, again, faith warriors who really pour into me. My sisters also, whenever we get together, we always talk about our spiritual walks, and we share things online and share things by phone and by text to keep each other lifted up. And my husband is a big part of my self-care. My husband is very relaxed. He's very calm. He's wise. And I have a very frenetic pace. I'm moving and grooving like a maniac, and he's very steady and slow. So he's a great aspect of my self-care. And, just trying to move more, trying to move my body, just hiking and walking. I prioritize that because so many of my best ideas come to me when I'm moving my body. And in a non-COVID world, I definitely would be working out and doing some Pilates or yoga or doing those things. But I have actually found that just for me, walking and hiking and I've been now walking neighborhoods and checking out neighborhoods and just being really kind of taking in the sights of neighborhoods I normally would not. And I love it. I'm looking at houses. I'm looking at flowers. I've been gardening a lot more. So, and it's funny because as you get older, and I find that as I'm aging, so many of the things that like my mom or my
Yeah.
grandmothers or my aunties would talk about that I could care less about, like gardening, or did you look at that beautiful bush? And I'd be like, I'm not thinking about these bushes. And now I'm getting older and I'm like, oh my God, is that a hydrangea? What a beautiful bush. And, you know, it's just my priorities have changed. You know, I'm not in the streets partying, going to the clubs. You know, I'm at my house. And so I'm falling back in love with like what it means when you're in your home and making your house a home. And I think we've gotten away from that. We've gotten away from baking and cooking and spending time together as a family and doing board games and talking on the telephone and all those things we used to do. And I've been trying to do a lot more of that during COVID, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And you know, looking at the flowers and walking through the neighborhoods, myself and my sisters, we before COVID, we were doing the same. And it's something about being able to look at nature.
Yes.
I understand when God says, look at the trees, look at the birds, look at the water, look at all these different things that they're just in their element being. And I then, when I see that, I'm like, oh God, I just want to be in my element being, you know, just be.
Yes.
So to have that opportunity. And as I was driving home today, I was like, you know, after all the fires and hearing all these things going on, I'm like, you know, you can't, it's basically the Lord saying you can't take nothing with you. So
that's
what
right.
Memories that you can create and the things with family and your people, because there's nothing
You
more
can't take any
better
of it with you.
than,
I know. Yeah.
than being able to have that. Go ahead.
That's a great point. And, you know, that is, I think, the opportunity for families. And certainly I'm that memory making advocate in my household. And, you know, my husband be like, we just took a trip. I'm like, I know, but I want to take another one. Or I want to take the boys on the, you know, I want to do this with the boys. And now, you know, our oldest son, he's a sophomore. And you know, we're like, the time is running out. In 3 years, he's going to be hitting the road and he's going to college and he's definitely going to be like on a whole different phase.
Right.
Or in a whole different phase of his life. And, you know, it's like we blink and the boys have gotten so big. So, you know, all of those small memories, I mean, just, you know, even if it's going miniature golfing with your kids or just, I take my children every 2 weeks, I mandate that we do a mother-son walk and we'll do the lake, we'll do Jack London, we'll do Lake Chabot. Like, you know, I just take them out. They want to skateboard, they want to ride on their scooters, whatever it is. But I love experiencing, you know, Oakland and the Bay with my children and just being in, like you said, being in nature with my children and making those memories, because when they're, you know, off to college, I'm going to miss them. You know, I'm used to having them with me. So I'm trying to like love up on them as much as I possibly can while we're all together.
And with that note, I want to ask, what would be your legacy? What would you like to leave to this world or share or create? What would be your legacy?
I think I have definitely created a bit of a legacy as a connector. I meet a lot of people and I've maintained a lot of friendships and connections, and I just bring people together. And sometimes I'll connect groups of friends and then they end up being closer friends, and then I'm not really even in the friendship circle because I've like moved on. So right. I just have that gift of like being able to forge really strong relationships with people and really stay connected. And I pride myself on being really authentic. You know, I pride myself on being able to just be who I am in every space that I'm in without compromising.
That's right.
And that's a huge gift, to be able to really be yourself and, you know, to grow into that comfort level where you're just like, this is me, you know, and I know as I get older, and a lot of, you know, my sister friends will tell me that, like, as you get older, you're going to get more and more confident about like who you are and be unapologetic. And it is what it is. And you don't have to please people. And I am finding that as I get older, I really feel that way. I'm like, yeah. But I just think, you know, at the end of the day, I always want to lead with kindness. You know, I just really want to try and to be a helper and to try, and if I can help someone out, I mean, that's my joy to do that. I just have that spirit where I want to really, I mean, if I can't like commit to something, that bothers me. And I know it's challenging because, you know, we all get these invitations, but I really try and show up. You know, I don't like to dial it in. I like to really show up with my whole self.
And you know, you're absolutely right, because when I was in your class and you were teaching me, at the end, I was like, you know, I knew that the Lord didn't just bring me there just to study. It was to meet you, and we were to form a relationship together.
Which we've kept for like 8 years, I think. 8 or 9 years.
And
yeah,
it's like when every day of your life, God places you in the life of somebody for a reason. And
for sure.
I do not know what it is right now, or as we talk, we may figure out, oh, we're going to do this together. It may not happen right now, but God will bring it around for divine time, divine order for things to happen. And I'm so grateful and thankful that I can call you my sister too. That
absolutely.
Right. I can call you my sister, because every time that I've called on you to help us with the bags, you've never said no. You made sure I got it if it was delivered.
That's right. And I just took a note now that you need some bags. So, you know, I'm on it because that should be, I mean, I just go back to like, we have that spirit of being collective and being in community. And, you know, that's the only way that we survived, is by helping each other and looking back and leaving those breadcrumbs and finding those places where we can have pathways. And I just think that, you know, that's a blessing to be able to do that. And certainly, you know, I so appreciate that you've been so great to me, that you've always looked out for me, and that I learned so much from you. I mean, I'm in awe of all the different things that you do and all the different talents you have. And I certainly think you bring your whole self to all the work that you do too. And that's very admirable. I mean, you know, have this rich family legacy that's like sort of in this one arena, and you've branched out into all these other arenas, which is really awesome, right? Because, you know, you have your family legacy, but you're also creating your own individual. You're not just resting on your laurels because of, you know, your parents and your family, but you're creating all these other great platforms. So.
Oh, I just love us. I just love us. Find down if there's anything else you want to share before I close it out. And if anybody wanted to ask my sister any questions or anything that she tapped on and shared about, the floor is yours.
Sure.
Anybody ask a question or?
Ayanna, I think that,
uh-oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bernice.
Okay. Ayanna, I think that everything that you talked about is really amazing to me. I think that your voice has meaning. And when I say that, I mean that you have a way of articulating your words and saying things that are so clear. And you being a creative person, me being a creative person, and because of your writings and everything that you do, I would like to hear from you what you would say if you had a platform, and then on that platform you had a multitude of people that you had to go before and speak, something like the I Have a Dream speech. But your topic, based upon what you were saying, one of the things that really caught my attention is when you say, make our way to freedom. What would you say? How would you talk to an audience of people about making our way to freedom?
Wow, that's a tall order. How can I duplicate something like that iconic speech?
First.
Yeah. I think that I would just convey that, you know, there's nothing we can't do. It wouldn't be like, I have a dream. I would just be like, there's nothing that we can't do. If we put our minds to it, there's nothing that we can't conquer. There's nothing that we can't achieve. And that we have to keep pushing. That would be my message. That we have to just keep going and to continue having fortitude. I mean, you know, as much as we continue to have adversity coming our way, we are making progress. I mean, Senator Kamala Harris is making progress. And, you know, despite all the haters and all the things that bubble up, you know, we have to really relish and celebrate and know that we are the original people, right? Our greatness is already established. So there's nothing that we can't do. And I mean, to that end, you know, my children have in their rooms, you know, things that harken back to Africa. I'm like, you're a descendant of kings. Like, you're literally kings. You're so intelligent, you know, and whenever my children invoke their dreams, I'm like, you can do it. My son right now wants to be a pilot. I'm like, we're in pilot mode. We're researching schools together. I'm reaching out for internships. Like, whatever they want to go after, I do not question it. I'm just there to try and, you know, support your vision. So that would be my message. There's nothing that we can't do.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keish, were you gonna?
Okay, so I just wanted to echo her. I'm also in awe of my sister Barbara. I've learned so much from her. I do not write. Okay, I read, and I only started reading because, you know, in college I had to read, so I developed a love for reading. But prior to college, I was like, show it to me in a movie. I don't want to read it and read it on the page, then formulate the image in my head and put the pieces together.
Right.
Because I'm more of a visual learner. But I wanted to say thank you for sharing what you're sharing. I would love to take your class, but I don't live in Oakland. I went to Merritt.
I teach online sometimes, though.
Okay, great. Man, online, I don't know, choice between my bed and that computer. I'm probably going to get in my bed. So I would prefer to be in a class. But if it's like an evening class, then I can make it because I can just.
I do teach evenings, and sometimes I teach Saturdays, too.
Great. I've always wanted to take African American Studies class, but it just never fitted my schedule when I was in school.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Merritt. I have a child development degree from Merritt.
Nice.
And then I also went to St. Mary's.
Nice.
They had a extended ed program I went for 27 months to earn a bachelor's.
Very nice.
And that's in human and community services. But my passion is working with people with disabilities, special needs, and stuff like that. However, when you were talking and it just a light bulb went off when you was like, you know, we suffer from PTSD. I'm like, I ain't never been in the military a day in my life, but I feel that we're suffering from PTSD by what we have to deal with. I have young sons. Well, I have grown boys. I have all boys. Nice. And so I have 2 that are grown and 2 that are not. But you know, I have that concern of, I don't want to say worry and fear because, you know, the Lord haven't given us a spirit of fear.
Right.
However, concerned about when they leave the house.
For sure.
Or if they get pulled, you know, just the things that we have to be concerned about as Black mothers for our sons. Mm-hmm. And being able to tell them, my youngest son is 14, and he did a video. He worked for the Warriors, so they had him do a video, and he shared about his experiences about being an African American male. Now, where we live, my son has never experienced, as far as he knows, racism. Yeah. Right? So, but he's been like the fly in the milk or whatever we were saying the other night. Like, he's been the only Black kid in his class, you know. Right. My son's a dancer, so that's how he expresses himself. So going to school with a bunch of white kids and then he danced and they just like, oh my God, he's just the best thing since sliced bread, you know. Okay. So that's good. Teach them to be humble and, you know, that this is a gift that God is giving you. And just because all these people are flocking to you, all these white people are flocking to you, you still need to know that it is a gift. And, you know, keeping him humble and keeping him, you know, on an even keel to where his brain don't blow up because these people are telling him these things or whatever. But also him understanding that even though he hasn't experienced the racism, he still worry about walking down the street and getting stopped by a police officer or being in a car, you know, all the things that people that have experienced racism has to deal with. My son has that fear. But how do you teach them to, you know, love everybody, but still be on guard, still, you know, have your defenses up type thing. And so, and to have to go through life with this shield of some sort up, but still trying to be a human being, you know, and not just like somebody the color of their skin, even though that's how he's going to be treated. And
it's so funny you should say that. Because I am a naughty mom, and I've already started teaching my 14-year-old to drive. Like in our driveway, I'm like, I'm gonna just take you out because I really want my kids to want to drive and to not think that the world is Uber and Lyft. I'm like, y'all will be driving. I'm like, don't think we're giving you a Lyft allowance. You need to know.
Right.
And I was like talking about this with my friends, and I was like, my conversation with my son is like, look both ways and move the shifter slowly, keep your foot on the brake. I mean, it's all like mechanics of driving. That is all I'm talking to him about. And then my husband's like, and then when you're done with that part, then I have to have a whole separate lesson with our son.
Right.
When he starts driving, about where to put your hands, about where to keep your registration, about what to do when you're pulled over. So that broke my heart when he said that. You know, he's just like,
right.
This is a twofold lesson. It's a twofold lesson because I'm giving him the mechanics, but my husband's going to give him the sociology, the social justice lesson that goes with driving. And, you know, that is an extra conversation that we have to have still in 2020. Just seems bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that we didn't have to worry about when we were driving. Where to put our hands, where to keep our registration, all that kind of stuff, you know. And they killing us black women too, you know. Hell, our own people is shooting the black women. Like what? You know what I mean? Like, this to live in this world and to understand where we come from and
it's
who
a faith
we are.
walk. It's a faith walk, 100%.
Right.
You know, 100%.
Right.
And you know, and I just applaud your son. I love that he's a dancer. I love that he's being courageous, and he's one of few of any other black kids. That takes a toll for sure, to be that strong, to be the person, you know, because being the only is being the lonely. I mean, most times, right? I mean, even if you can get through it, there's, I think, still some collateral, you know, damage as far as like, why am I the only one? I mean, that can be really tough because we seek community. I mean, that's just sort of who we are. So I'm really happy to hear that he's being that courageous. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, he's a good kid. He just gets on my nerves from time to time, but you know.
That's a typical mom move.
Like, he needs to get self-sufficient. You know, he want to learn how to drive. I let him drive like one time. I was like, oh no, your daddy is going to do that because you're about to give me a doggone heart attack. No,
I know. Yeah.
I passed. So
that's so funny.
Commend you. And yes, definitely, you know, want to try to take a class here or there, whatever. I got to figure out how to, you know.
While COVID's going on, I told them I cannot teach because I cannot manage my children's homeschooling and a class and my job. And like, that would be bananas. But I am hoping to get back in the classroom. In fact, what I'm working on is a Black Lives Matter course while I'm not teaching. So I'm trying to work with some colleagues in the department, and I'm trying to get that situated so that when I come back, I can introduce the Black Lives Matter course. So fingers crossed. That
I want to definitely be in that class. And I wanted to touch on when you were saying how when you're at work, and I know we got to go, but when you saying that, because I am a very outgoing, bubbly, fun, positive person.
Yeah.
However, if you say something or do something I do not like or I disagree with, I have no qualms with telling you.
Right.
Now, like 6, 7, 8 years ago, I had no filter. I've gotten a lot better. You know, I guess as you know, you say you get older, you get a little wiser.
You're more mellow and wise. Yeah.
Carefully, and I try to, you know, and I will, you know, I've told them, I'm like, I'm sure I've been viewed as the angry black woman because when I was working at the last job before this job, I was probably one of 3 black people on campus outside of our students, but staff wise, and for a while, I was like one of 2, and then I was the only all black. My friend, she's like Italian and black, but I was just, you know, only black, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was always being looked at as the, you know, the angry black woman because I talk with my hands. My tone changes. My voice raises when I get excited about something or when I'm passionate about something.
Right.
It, you know, it raises my octave, it changes or whatever. But I need you to understand that what I'm saying to you, I mean it 100%. And I need you to understand why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And not for you to feel like inferior to me or threatened or uncomfortable or whatever because I'm sharing my truth or saying, you know, this is not right and this is why it's not right. And as black women, we get that bad rap because we can't because we talk with our hands, because our voice changes when we get excited. All those different things that occur that don't probably occur in other, you know, nationalities or whatever. And so, but then you viewed as an angry Black person, or, you know, I don't want to say that Keisha gonna get upset.
Now
or Keisha gonna...
the language has shifted, and now there's awareness around white fragility and cultural bias and implicit bias and, you know, unpacking your white privilege. I mean, these are things that different corporations are invoking in their workplaces. So, you know, I think now we can say, like, are you in a white fragility space? You know, we have like the languaging to go back to, you know, these folks in the workplace that hopefully will help them see, like, this is a two-way conversation. This is a dynamic. You know, you can't assign the way you express and emote and think that I have to conform to that.
Right.
You know, in order for me to be my authentic self. So I am grateful that there are some novels and some learnings and some books that have come out again this critical year of 2020 that a lot of white folks are starting. I mean, the white folks, I think they're doing a lot of reading because they have work to do. They have homework to do. So if you look at the New York Times bestseller list, it is full of books about anti-racism and white privilege and all those things, because I think that there is a shift. It's not perfect. We know it's not perfect, but at least we can also know about those books and know about the languaging so that we can sort of arrest that. And then it's more like, not, you know, it's more academic, and then it's not as perceived as being so threatening. But I hear you 100%. So just that's the code word. Like, oh, it seems like you're having a little bit of white fragility right now. Are you in a fragile space? And then it's like, what? Yeah.
Fragility.
White fragility.
Fragility. With an F. Fragility. Okay.
Yeah.
These big words. See, I have to go look this stuff up.
Yes. Well, I'll send Barbara a list of some of these books that are circulating right now so that you guys have them.
Absolutely. And please let her know when you get that classic, because I really, really need to take the classic.
I'll do that for sure.
Absolutely.
Well,
thank you.
We have, was there anybody else? I thought someone else said they wanted to share and ask a question too. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we have come to a close, and I am so grateful and thankful for Miss Ayanna Anderson. I want to say B-HBrilliantMinds Project Inc. is inviting you and everyone to continue to celebrate Juneteenth 196, a special 2020 edition. And we are coining, we are the breath of our ancestors. We will never break, because we are history shakers and makers. This is in honor of acknowledging that Black culture, Black minds, Black breath, and Black minds matter. And we are saying it loud because we are Black and proud. This is sponsored by of the Common Council Foundation. We want to thank them. This series will be uploaded to www.bhbrilliantminds.org. And before we get out of here, I will cut off the recording, but we're going to take a picture. Someone snap a picture for me. But this was awesome. Give ourselves a hand.
This was fantastic, lady.
We have more.
This is what I need to take me to Friday. Woo!